If you're a future filmmaker, you have to watch this episode. In today's episode, we're interviewing one of the biggest people we've ever had on this podcast, Chris Fenton. He's worked on over 70 movies and he's not stopping. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the podcast. Chris Fenton, thanks for coming on, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. It's an honor.
Yeah, dude, you've done so many things that I watched growing up. Like, you've worked on 47 Ronin, Breakpoint, Iron Man 3. Like, this is crazy. And then your recent film, Bad Counselors, is coming out July 22nd through the 27th. So, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I've been involved, I think, at this point, about 70 movies I've packaged together. I've been a producer on roughly 25 or so. Got a lot more coming down the pipeline, and I definitely have made my fair share of bombs, but there's been some good ones out there too, and we got a great one coming out July 22nd.
That's great, man. I love that. 70 films. That's crazy. I mean, what got you into this industry?
Actually, there's a book behind me, Feeding the Dragon, which is a book I wrote that came out from Simon and Schuster last, 2020. And it's funny, it was supposed to talk a lot about the U.S.-China exchange that I was involved in between the two superpowers in terms of how Hollywood operated and what we were doing to get our movies into that market. And it's funny, the first 70 pages are how I got into the business, like which was,
Oh, nice.
sort of a there was no real rhyme or reason. It was actually a pretty sort of, I would say, happenstance kind of situation that then led to this crazy career. So a lot of people were sort of like, "Hey, I know the book was 300 pages and you talk a lot about US China, but I sort of wish you extended the first 70 pages." So to
Mhm.
answer that question, I graduated college up in upstate New York and went to Cornell University, got an engineering degree. Graduated in '93, which was not a great year to be a college grad. The economy was not doing great. Spent almost a year traveling the country, sleeping on my fraternity couches on various college campuses, and trying to figure out where I wanted to spend the rest of my life. Mainly because I didn't have a good job opportunity coming out of college, and a buddy of mine who was in Los Angeles told me to come on out and visit him for a weekend. And I was at the time living in Las Vegas because there was a bit of a boom in that market in 1993. And I apologize. I got like a garbage truck, I think, moving in my
It's all
backyard.
good.
But what was interesting is that I came out to visit him and I never left. I actually left
Mm.
all my stuff in Circus Casino at the time and never went back to go get it. And I found myself in a basketball league with a bunch of young guys in it, and they said, "Hey, there's this entertainment biz out here, where you can actually start at the very bottom, doing that wax on, wax off, Mr. Miyagi kind of thing, and work your way up." And I thought, wow, that sounds interesting. And next thing I know, I'm in the mailroom at the William Morris Agency, and the rest is sort of history. That sort of moved me into various parts of the business. But I spent 10 years there representing writer, directors, actors, and producers and financiers, and then started essentially a company that was a small version of William Morris. We sort of took off. My old partner was a guy named Walter Hamada who ran DC Films for a long time
Yeah.
over at Warner Brothers. And then we sold that company to the Chinese. And then my US China sort of adventures took off from there. And after that, in 2018, I put a film fund together that's over at Lionsgate. And then joined up with this amazing upstart studio financier down in Nashville, Tennessee called Loam Entertainment. And we started that in January 2025. And then, boom, Bad Counselors is our first movie coming out of the gates, which is going to hit theaters July 22nd.
Nice. I love that. Thank you. What would you say is your favorite part about being a producer, just being in the entertainment field?
Um, wow, what's my favorite part? Well, it's changed a lot. I mean, When I got into the business, it was actually a crazy opportunity. It was called the Wall Street in the 90s back then. A lot of Ivy Leaguers were coming into the business, and there was a lot of real momentum as far as opportunities were concerned. It's changed quite a bit now. We're going through a lot of disruption. But back then, it was really fun because, not only we weren't making any money. I mean, I think in the mailroom I was making $300 a week, and I was teaching SAT courses on weekends to try to make ends meet. But I found with three buddies this incredible like house on the beach in Malibu because they
Wow.
just had all these fires. It cost $500 a month for each of us to live on the beach in Malibu, so you could actually afford a place to not make a lot of money in, but feel that California dream. And then on top of it, we didn't really have to pay much for food because there were premieres literally every night. You'd go and eat and drink for free. That's where we did most of our networking and socializing. And even at the agency, there were staff meetings that were filled with all kinds of great food after the agents left, so you could eat for free there. And then once you became an agent, you had an unlimited expense account. So even though you weren't making that much, as far as income is concerned, you were out and about meeting everybody. I mean, when I teach at University of Southern California, I talk a lot about how the business is not one that technically like cream rises to the top. In fact, it requires a lot of luck and a lot of hard work. But my theory is you want to own all the tickets, own all the lottery tickets, because it is a lottery. And you'll never own all the lottery tickets. But what you can do is try to acquire as many as you can. And that essentially means you got to be out meeting everybody you can, reading everything you can. Every new thing that you learn is a lottery ticket. Every new person you meet is a lottery ticket. All those lottery tickets stack up. The harder you work, the longer hours you work, the more effective you are. Those are all lottery tickets. And you just want to pile them up in your hands and hope that your number gets called, because that's called creating your own luck. And if you do that, there's a really good shot you get there,
Mm.
even though it's a business where it does take luck. You're putting luck on your side. You're getting you're acquiring those lottery tickets, and eventually, the people that deserve it get there.
I love that. That's really, really good. How important would you say like networking is? Because you talked about like networking and stuff like that.
Networking's everything. I mean, when you get out in the business, you're essentially the freshman class that comes out. So that freshman class is a bunch of people that are very unpowerful in every part of the business, but they could be very powerful someday. So those people are the ones that you're going through, the trenches with. You're having all those battle scars with. Those are the people that you try to figure out who you can trust and who you don't trust. And every person you meet through every person that you actually are introduced to becomes part of that network. So those are all lottery tickets, right? And say you know 100 people, well, those 100 people know 100 people. You want to get to know them all.
Mm.
And out of all those thousands of people that you meet, you're going to come down to about 10 that are like really hardcore friends through thick and thin. You'll probably have another 20 to 30 that are pretty good friends. They'll go to bat for you, but it's got to be a little more give and take. And then you'll have others that are like literally friends because of the business you're in. And, as long as you help them on one thing, they'll help you on another. And then there's a bunch that just simply won't have your back. But, when you got something hot and everybody wants it, they're going to be somebody that comes calling and says, "Hey, I want to do this." And you go, "You know what? As long as you pay the most, you got it." That kind of a thing. So, you just got to really suss through who your people are and who you can really trust, and know that there's a lot of people out there that really won't have your back through thick and thin, but they sort of become important parts of your network as long as you understand the depth of that relationship.
Gotcha. Would you say like there's like you do like favors and stuff like that? Like, hey, if you do this for me, like I'll do that for you. Is that something that goes on in this kind of field?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously there's different depths of friendships and network that you'll have, but you got to realize that even great friendships, right? Like if you're like your best friend, if you're constantly needing something from him, but you're not really providing any sort of reciprocity to that relationship, eventually that friendship is going to grow thin, right?
Mm.
So even the closest friendships do require some sort of back and forth, at least on an emotional level, or on an engagement level, or a favor level, or on, just fully supportive level. There's got to be a back and forth. Um, with a lot of friendships that you would call, I guess, business friends. Yeah, they do rely on, hey man, I helped you out 3 years ago on this project. You really needed somebody to go bat for you with that certain director. And now I need that favor returned. Like that,
Mm,
that's one. If there's another situation where, say, you haven't done something for somebody, but you could offer something down the road. Hey man, can you go to bat for this script? It's, you guys are talking about it in your staff meeting on Monday. You know,
mm,
Joe Smith is going to bring it up. Will you vouch for it and say it's great? I have X, Y, and Z clients down the road that I'll happily put you in touch with, or whatever it is. Can you make that happen? So if you can figure out that sort of give and take, you're going to be a lot better apt to essentially get the favors that you need out of people in order to sort of, move those business relationships forward. I think every relationship you can probably get one favor out of, if it's somebody of relative relative standing on the morals and ethics and sort of human level. But for the most part, you need to return that favor at some point to get another one.
mm. Gotcha. That's good to know. That's really good to know. Thank you. Wow, that's awesome. You worked on like Iron Man 3 and then your recent film was Bad Counselors. What was it like working on like Iron Man 3 and then going over this Bad Counselors? Like, what are there big differences or did it feel just like, well, this is just work, you know?
Well, I would think the biggest difference is probably, well, our lead star in one movie made barely scale, which is Bad Counselors, and our lead star in Iron Man 3 made $25 million. You
Wow.
know, and that was before the back end kicked in, right? But that was
Yeah.
the guarantee. I think on top of it, you have one movie that utilized, I think, about 8,500 crew members, or
Mm,
people that were involved in the film. Bad Counselors was roughly 1,200. One movie was made for, I mean, we're quiet about our Bad Counselors budget, but put it this way, it was in the single digits millions, whereas Iron Man 3 was well over $200 million. And although the similarities are pretty interesting, because we shot Iron Man 3 largely in North Carolina, and we shot Bad Counselors largely in North Carolina. So there you go. There's some
oh,
similarities,
no
but
way.
those movies were, I'm very proud of those films, although some of the script notes that I was trying to get passed with Kevin Feige and Marvel didn't get approved, but we got a couple of them approved, which was good. And they were both really interesting lessons learned in those. I mean, Bad Counselors is one that we made 100% fully American made. We feel like there's a real opportunity to get people that are excited about supporting American made product with what
Yeah.
Bad Counselors is. And then with Iron Man 3, that was a movie that we touted as the first U.S. China co-production out of all the big tentpoles that are made out there. That one in 2013 when it came out was the very first big, massive franchise movie that incorporated the two superpowers. It was also the last movie that was co-financed by another partner outside of Disney, which was us. And it went on to break every record imaginable in the China market. I mean, we made $20 million opening day. That was back in 2013, whereas the last Marvel movie, which was Iron Man 2 that opened in that market, made 20 million over its full run. So that movie also was only supposed to make $650 million worldwide, and it made $1.3 billion worldwide. So it was a
Mm,
huge success.
yeah.
I'd be okay with Bad Counselors just making $1 billion worldwide, but we can try to beat the Iron Man 3 numbers.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I mean, even if like Bad Counselors is on a smaller budget, like I can usually tell like, like, oh, it's about, I couldn't really tell like that it was a lower budget film by like the production and like the lighting and stuff like that. It looks like it was like high up there. So like huge accomplishment for you guys. Like congratulations on that. That is awesome.
Well, thanks. Well, hopefully all your friends and followers and everybody go check it out. And we want them to go out and buy tickets now too, so that the way the movie business works is that you're guaranteed a certain amount of screens. We're going to do about 1,000 screens nationwide, but a lot of the screens come on as your pre-sales start to sell. So it's very important that people go out and start buying tickets as quickly as possible so that we can start selling out theaters. And as the theaters start to sell out, they add more and more. And that just means that more and more people will have an opportunity to go see Bad Counselors. So go to badcounselors.com, find out where it's playing, and hopefully all your friends go out and buy some seats and have a good time in the theater. But I'm glad you really liked it. That's cool. And you're one of the few who actually got a sneak peek at it early.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, talking about bad counselors, what made this like super special? Like, what made you guys want to pursue it?
Well, I think there was a couple things. I mean, number one is we've done a lot of movies over, I'd say, the last 10 years in Hollywood that just seem to have lost their way a little bit and get pulled into certain political ideologies or whatever. And when we just wanted to make a really fun, entertaining movie that people just feel like they can go see in a theater and relax and have that a bit of escapism and not feel preached to in any way. Another thing that we wanted to try was to sort of successfully dance with the nuance between audiences that are secular by nature and audiences that are of faith. We wanted something that would play to both parties, and then on top of it, I do feel like whether somebody is Christian or somebody is just never even thought about religion, walks out of that theater and just is called for something greater. It feels like there's something bigger in life to go pursue and be a part of. We don't want to be preachy in any sort of way, but we do feel like there might be an opportunity for people maybe not of faith to feel a little curious about it, or at least think about it a little bit. And I know we threaded that needle nicely because I tested the movie at University of Southern California, and people loved it. And in fact, at a campus that is, I think, really, atheist, if not at least pretty secular in nature, there were definitely a couple people in our audience that outed themselves as true Christians and true believers because they were laughing at every single part of the movie that I think those of secular nature might not really like get the joke of as much. So it was pretty funny to watch in the theater and the campus. And I just feel like we created something that works for families too, which is hard to do with smaller budget movies. Right now we have the Illumination film, which is out. There's Toy Story, which is out. Those are huge, big budget movies.
Yeah,
This one, I think plays as a PG-13 in a way, maybe sort of like the Cheaper by the Dozens, used to do, or those kind of films, or The Sandlot, and it's something where families can go. The parents will feel nostalgia for what their summer camp experience was because it's like something almost all of us have experienced at one point in time or another. And then kids will love it too because, they're going through it right now, or they know friends that have gone through it and they can relate.
yeah, totally. That's so cool. That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah. So you wrote a book called Feeding the Dragon. What made you start that, and what is the story behind that?
Well, that was when I left the company that I was running. That was actually I was running the international division of a major Chinese company that was publicly traded. When I left that, I had a bunch of different entities approach me about maybe writing a book about it, like how to lessons when it comes to working in China, or things that are interesting about the media space in China. And I personally loved, like, first person perspectives of, like, say, business memoirs. Like, for instance, I don't know if you ever read Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis.
Mm,
Those type of movies were sort of my template, and I wanted to write essentially my story. And it was interesting because my story to publishers wasn't all that interesting, mainly because people didn't know me as it wasn't like, oh, Tom Cruise writing his story. It was Chris Fenton. No one who knew who Chris Fenton was. And I said, well, let me tell you, I had enough crazy stuff that happened in my experiences and adventures and colorful, journey that I think I can overcome the fact that no one knows who the heck I am and actually just dive into a book that's like really interesting and fun to read. So, Simon and Schuster decided, okay, like we'll give you a shot, and I wrote the thing literally in 6 weeks. It was the quickest thing that came to
Oh,
mind. There's nothing easier to write than when it's your own experience and you're like super passionate about it. And yeah, it came out in 2020 and it ended up on, the cover of the New York Times, Wall Street, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. I was on every news thing there was talking about the thing, and it was quite a journey just in itself. On top of it, it was during COVID, so it made it
mm,
easier to do all kinds of television once everybody started moving to Zoom, and you didn't have to fly to New York and everywhere else to go do it. And Yeah, just that's sort of how it came together. And I've been thinking about various other ones, and quite frankly, I got into the business because I had written a book when I was in college that sold to Fox. It was supposed to be like their next sort of like Animal House type of franchise, which,
oh,
um,
wow.
like most things that studios buy, they never really see the light as far as getting made into a movie. But that was a really fun experience, was getting that book bought and watching, screenwriters when I was an assistant try to tackle it and adapt it into a film.
Wow, that's so cool. What did you learn like from writing it or like when like people actually reading it? Like was there like something that you never thought was gonna like, oh wow, I never even thought about it that way when you were finally giving it to an audience and then like processing it?
Uh, I mean, well, writing is a very interesting process by itself because there's a lot of times where, well, first of all, just getting sitting down and starting the writing process on a daily basis is sometimes a pain in the butt. You try to, this one I was pretty passionate about, but I've written two others, and sometimes it's sort of like, how do you how do you get motivated, to sit down and start writing, and you'd rather rearrange your sock drawer or something than sit down and start writing again. But
Yeah.
once you get into it, you hit, Michael Jordan used to talk about how you like hit the zone when you're playing a sport, and like everything starts to come easier and you see things a lot easier, and it just becomes a part of your body and your mind.
Mm,
Same thing happens in writing, like I found when I would sit down at my computer and write. In fact, the first book I wrote, I didn't even own a computer, so I wrote that book on various computers in like the computer lab at college, and then when I was traveling the country, I would borrow computers like from computer labs at different colleges or places and fraternities that I was staying at, and it was a complete mess because I'd have to print it all out, and then eventually I had like, like 1,000 pages of printout, and then I had to find somebody that I paid a lot of money to scan it and get it into it was a whole thing. But when you get into that zone, maybe it takes you a page or two to get into it, or maybe it takes you just a sentence, whatever it is. But when you reread it, when you're in the zone versus not, because you're like, ugh, this stuff is terrible right now. Like I gotta, get to where I was getting good. And sometimes you find out like even a whole day's worth of writing, you just never got there, and that writing has to get tossed or whatever it is. But it's always an interesting experience. And if you're looking to get into the film business, like you got to be very left and right brain. You need to think on the
mm,
creative side, but you also got to think on the business side. And, one of the best pieces of advice I got as a writer was from Kurt Vonnegut. I saw him speak when he was at Cornell one semester when I was up there, and he was a graduate and he was a physics major. And somebody in the class said, "Wait a minute, you were a physics major at Cornell. Like, how did you become one of the great writers of all time in America?" And he goes, um, "Mainly because I didn't know any better. Like, I had no idea if I was a good writer or not. So I just kept
mm,
writing." And somebody was like, "I don't understand what that means." He's like, "I was a physics major. I had no idea how to critique my stuff, nor did I know anybody that in physics that could read my stuff and tell me if it was good or bad. So I just kept writing." He's like, everybody I knew in the English department, that was a writer, they never finished anything because A, they would critique their stuff to death, and then they would have everybody else that they knew critique it to death too, and they never finished anything. He's like, the best thing you can do as a writer is actually finish what you started.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. I love that. That's awesome. That's super encouraging because like I hear a lot of stories, and then me personally, like writing like scripts and stuff, and like we just don't finish it because we get scared, or we're just like, oh no, I don't want people to see this because it's too personal, you know. So it's like that's really encouraging just to sit down and just like finish it, you know.
I will tell you that the key to, first of all, as a writer, you got to find out what your voice is. And that's going to take, like, as a screenwriter, it's going to take multiple scripts to figure that out. Like I thought when I wrote my first book, I thought I was, I before I wrote every page, I would read a few pages of the books that I loved and was trying to sort of mimic the voice of, which took time because there was a moment where I thought I could write like Charles Dickens or I could write like some of the great, storytellers that I had written, that I had read earlier in like high school and in grammar school or whatever it was. But then I realized I was much more of a storyteller in terms of like how I would sit around a campfire and tell people a story that happened to me. So when I figured that out, I started to try to understand writers that were a bit like that. So probably the more polished version of that writer was John Knowles, who wrote a book called The Separate Piece. I don't know if you've ever read that, but
I
um,
haven't. No.
I would read a little bit of The Separate Piece every day before I sat down to just try to figure out, like, on an elevated level, like what I would aspire to be. Then I liked Bret Easton Ellis a lot because his stories a lot of times were about the character. He went way edgier and way more like hardcore on some of his characters, but they were at least the same age and they spoke the same kind of way that mine did. So I liked reading him. Then, of course, I would read as much of Catcher in the Rye as I could. Like, the first book I wrote really was my attempt at like, if Catcher in the Rye had a sequel, what would that be?
Mhm.
So, reading J.D. Salinger, and I read all of his other books and short stories and stuff like that too, just to get an idea of how he thought. But like, Catcher in the Rye was a key one. And then there was another one when I was polishing the book that I read a bunch of by Dave Eggers, which was called The Heartbreaking Work of Staggering Genius. And that
Oh,
was a guy who wrote a bestseller when he was in school, I think at University of California at Berkeley. So that was one that I thought was really interesting because he was roughly my age and he had found a way to be successful as an author. So, just really trying to figure out like what your voice is key. And then the next thing is to really understand the genre that you're really good at. There is nothing worse than when I was an agent and somebody be like, "Oh, will you read this screenwriter and think about, representing him or her?" And I'd be like, "Oh, okay, what genre do they write in?" Well, they've written a romantic comedy and they've written a horror movie and an action movie, and you should read them all and see what you think. And I'm like, if they've written all those genres, I'm not interested because they obviously haven't figured out what their voice is and what they're good at, because even if they could write all those different genres, no one's going to care. Like you have to brand yourself as, oh, here's the next young voice in comedy. Here's the next young voice in horror. Here's the next young voice in action. It has to be a brand that you're identified with, and then you can expand from there over time, but only after success. Like if you're somebody that comes from the comedy space, you better be really, really adept and successful at comedy before you give go try to be your Jordan Peele and pull that comedy into horror because no one's going to care. No one's going to believe you can do it. And no one's going to even want to do that because they can't brand off of you into horror because you're known as a comedy guy.
gotcha. You must be seeing like a ton of scripts like all the time. What is one thing like stands out when you're reading a script? Like, wow, this is really good, or like, what's one that you're like, I'm not even gonna look at this, like, and you just kind of put it away to the side.
Yeah, I think It's a good question because, coverage used to be a really important facet of like young people getting into the business, right? You'd read, every weekend I'd have six scripts that I would have to read for different bosses, and then I would have to put together a coverage which gave the log line and the concept and sort of the two-page summary and then a one-page evaluation of like what you thought of the script, and that would take you 90 minutes to read the script, 90 minutes to write the coverage, and multiply that by six, your whole Sunday is like reading and writing coverage. Today with AI, you don't really, you don't, you know, no one's going to do summaries themselves and read the script and write out the summary. So you can write the summary out. You could probably tinker with the summary with AI to come up with a great sort of or the best version of a concept or
Mm-hmm.
elevator pitch out of it. And that's sort of the key ingredient for going, okay, is this concept something that can get people into theatrical seats, right? Like you just don't know. But if it's something that sounds like you can put a one sheet together pretty easy or put a movie trailer together or a commercial on television, then maybe okay, this script has a fighting chance to be made into a film. But the more important part is the voice, right? Like there's only so many plots. Like Plato said, I think there's like eight different plots in in storytelling. It's essentially the boy meets girl, girl, that kind of stuff. And so there's not a lot of different versions of a story. So it really comes down to what's the voice and what are the characters. Like, are the characters really unique? Do the characters have a really important sort of engaging emotional point of view? Do they have a really fascinating story? Are the obstacles really interesting? Are the antagonists unique? What's the dialogue like? Is the dialogue stilted? Does it feel caricature-y? Or is it really grounded in reality? And in fact, something that's like really unique and something you haven't really experienced before when you read that script. Um, and those characters, the ones that are going to help drive a movie forward, because then you get the really interesting actors wanting to be a part of the script or the really interesting filmmaker involved. So you have to have a very unique voice. It has to stand out. It has to have a real, um, you know, driving force as far as like why somebody should get behind characters, why people want to hate somebody in a script or love somebody in a script. Um, it's got to feel grounded in a belief that, oh, this journey could happen. Audiences will find this journey relevant. Ooh, this low point. I love great low points in a script. You get to that end of that second act, like what is the low point? What is the point of the movie where you feel like all hope is lost? And then what's the really interesting nugget that happens at the beginning of the third act that allows you to feel like there is some hope coming back, right? You have, oh, it's been a couple months from when I saw Hail Mary, but you
Oh
know,
yeah.
Hail Mary to me was exactly the kind of big storytelling
Mm.
franchise film that Hollywood should be telling, because that movie had no political ideology. That movie was not forced into some sort of casting directive. I thought all the characters were well cast. I thought the character of Ryan Gosling was extremely well written to the point where you could actually just stare at him for 90 minutes of the 2 hour movie and be fine and not feel claustrophobic. His essential like bromance
Yeah.
and emotional attachment to this rock was extremely well crafted and believable. And then even the low point where you feel like, oh, there's no hope for him ever to get back. It's just,
Yeah.
he's just got to sacrifice it all, and he's not going to get back, and he's going to lose this friend and all that kind of stuff. But then there's this nugget of hope that does, churn the third act in a way that suddenly makes you excited that this movie might actually end up in a way where it's a happy ending, and I loved that film, other than it was, I thought, too long, but like that was great. I thought the latest Top Gun movie
Oh,
is literally the template for big tentpole movie story structure. It was perfect. Like that Top Gun movie was perfect. I thought the latest why am I forgetting it? The F1 movie I thought was
oh, yeah,
fantastic too. That I'm not talking about what should win Oscars for Best Picture. I'm talking about what Hollywood storytelling should be doing, which is
mm,
bringing red, blue, purple, people of all races, creeds, colors, gender, whatever it is, into a movie theater, having them enjoy a community experience, having them flourish as human beings in something that's communal and something that's engaging and escapist and entertaining and makes them laugh, makes them cry, makes them, feel all kinds of different emotions, and then walk out of that theater going, that was a great $20 that I spent to go
yeah,
see something of 2 hours long.
yeah. That's really good. That's really great. You're also a professor. Like that's a huge. That's awesome at USC, right?
Yeah, well, I don't know on that side of the country if USC means University of South Carolina, but
Oh,
I'm at University of Southern California, which out here
okay,
it's the only USC that exists. So
gotcha. That's awesome. So you're also like working on movies, but you're also like teaching it. Like what? How is that? Like, how'd you get into wanting to be a professor and like taking what you learned and teaching it to others?
Well, it was well, I got was asked by actually it was part of my network, right? You own all the tickets, and somebody now that's the assistant dean over there was actually an assistant at William Morris back in my early days, and she always liked me and thought I was really interesting as far as the speaker's concerned, and she read my books and thought I'd be a really interesting ingredient in the discipline of the business of cinematic arts. So at
Mm,
University of Southern California, there's the Marshall School of Business, which is both undergrad and grad school, and then there's the Cinematic Arts program, which is an undergrad and grad program, and in between them is the Mitchell School, which essentially takes the best of the business school dynamics and teachings and then combines them with the creative storytelling side of the cinematic arts program, and we essentially teach the business of cinematic arts. So that's it's almost the perfect left brain right brain type of place for me to be as an instructor, and I love it. And we have really smart kids from all over the country and quite frankly all over the world that are trying to learn how to figure out what the career path is for the next 40 or 50 years after they graduate, which by the way is hard to figure out even over the next 6 months to a year.
yeah, yeah, that's great. What's one piece of advice that you give them that you feel like is like like if you leave with anything, just please remember this one thing.
I'll give you two. I'll say number one is you want the goal, which you'll never achieve, but the goal is to own all the tickets. Okay.
Mm,
So everything, like I said earlier, it's a lottery. It is, and it's probably more of a lottery now than it's ever been. Like trying to figure out how you're going to be successful in a very disruptive Hollywood ecosystem is going to be a real challenge. So you need to own as many lottery tickets as you can, try to own them all. So that means get out there, network your butt off, work your butt off, learn your butt off, and keep your eyes and ears open for every opportunity. So that's number one. And then number two is actually I'm going to give three. Number two is you can't be afraid of getting fired because you're 100%
mm,
going to get fired at least once, maybe twice, maybe three times, four times, five times. Everybody I have come in, this is why I said, have your followers follow me, because when I do semesters, I essentially chart the career path and essentially the maze of everybody on a whiteboard. And it shows even the most successful people that I have that run studios, they've been fired at least three different times in their career. And
wow.
we talk about how they come back from that, what they felt when they got fired, how hopeless it felt, but what did they do to get back on their feet? That's crucial. The other thing that I do when I do the career maze with people is I talk about the points in their career where they make the transition between the three I's, right? The first thing that you need when you enter the business. You got to be impressive. In order to get a job, somebody's going to have to be impressed by you. Like I'm impressed by you. You got this podcast, you're creating your own content. You obviously are extremely good at interviewing. You do your diligence, your research, you got, good lighting, you know what you're doing. In fact, um, but I do a podcast called Plate and Ponder Empty Nesting with my wife. It's Plate and Ponder Empty Nesting with Jen and Chris Fenton, and we do it mainly audio, although we're going to start doing some video. And I got my Rodecaster Duo and mixing board and all that stuff, and I can't for the life of me figure out how to use Zoom and not get the like a tingy sort of um audio out of it. So
Yeah. Yeah.
somehow yours is probably pretty. I mean, I've listened to, Chris's thing and you don't have a tingy audio. So I'm going to have to ask you what that secret sauce is. But
Yeah.
anyway, you're impressive. Okay.
Thank you.
You'll figure out how to get that first gig and then you'll thrive from there. Because you'll start owning all the tickets or you'll be pursuing that. But then there's a point in your career where you go from impressive to influential, which essentially means you got that job, but when can you get influential? Well, you'll start to get to that point when you start influencing people on things even without much power in terms of what you do day to day. So you might be an assistant, you might come across a script that really moves you, and you might walk into a meeting and say, "Hey, I'm only an assistant, but I'm telling you we have to make this script into a movie, and here's why." That's when you start to show your influence. But then once you get in a position of power and you can actually hire people or buy a script or maybe move a project forward into production or whatever, that's really when you become influential. So you start impressive, you move into the moment of influential, and then the third eye is when you're impactful, right? So impactful to me can come on a variety of different levels. But like if I think of when I was impactful in the business, and by the way, I'm a little regretful for what we were doing between the US and China because obviously looking back wasn't in the best interest of the United States. But at the time, what we did with, I say, Iron Man 3 or a movie like Looper with Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is we created these co-productions between two superpowers that did not get along, and we got them to get along with something that was very high profile, that was on the cover of every paper. Everybody was talking about it, and it made the relationship between these two superpowers that didn't get along a little better. That was
Mm.
impactful, right? I look at Bad Counselors, and even though the movie hasn't come out and the movie might not make a lot of money, it doesn't have to make a lot of money, but um, forget what might happen July 22nd. But if you think
Mm.
about the impact we've already had with it, which was hiring only Americans to make this movie, and the fact
Mm.
that that template now is one that everybody's talking about and is allowing me to get on various news programs and podcasts and stuff and talk about the importance of bringing back manufacturing of TV and film back to the United States. That's impactful. And
Mm.
then we talked earlier about this idea of, hey, you know what? This movie calls for something greater of the audience, but it's not a faith-based movie. It's not a movie that like people are going to be like, oh, there's one of those, sort of, you know, faith-based movies that are a little hokey or whatever it is. Like this is a movie that appeals to all audiences, and we're trying to straddle that very fine line between secularism and of faith. And I think we did a great job of it. And if people go see it in theaters and then go see it downstream on different platforms and the word gets out that you can make these kind of movies, that will be impactful too. So influential, impressive, influential, impactful. Very key.
Yeah, yeah. Let's say you were starting like all over, like it's your first day in the industry. What would you do? Like, is there anything you would do differently, or would you like, no, I no regrets?
Honestly, if I were thinking about getting into the movie business at your age, I'd probably be doing exactly what you're doing right now, which
Mm.
is trying to cultivate, learning the art of creating content, learning the art of creating content that you then figure out smart ways to distribute, learning how
Mm.
that content either works to engage audiences or is simply a tree falling in the woods that no one hears, which is fine. Like I post all the time on social media, whether I'm at the Dragon Feeder on Twitter, I'm, feeding the dragon on Instagram. Like there's
Mhm.
there's a lot of content I'll post that like it's almost like, wait, did anybody even notice I did that? Like
It's hard, yeah.
and sometimes it's the stuff that I think is the most potentially viral, right? Like,
Mm.
but it's not, so wait, why was that? And that's like, I'm 55. Like it's a little harder to digest that and put the time and effort into figuring that out at my age because I got a lot of other stuff going on. And then on top of it, sometimes I'm like, maybe I'll just stay with the legacy stuff, but
Mm.
for you, you have time on your hands. You're like, you can grind, you can be persistent, you can not care, right? And just keep going. You want to have the, essentially the memory of a goldfish, right? And just keep figuring it out because if you do figure it out, which you will, and you're already starting to, like it's
Thank
going to
you.
make a great resume. It's going to get you into a great, film school or whatever you want to do, and then it's going to help you be impressive to get that first job.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for all the kind words. It's very sweet, very kind. Before wrapping up, is there anything you want to plug or anything you want to say?
No, I think I plugged it all. I mean, get your peeps following me so I can start seeing what they're up to too, so I can figure out what I got to curve my semesters and curriculum towards. Number one, number two is get out and buy tickets to this movie. We want to support American made, and we want to support good storytelling and unique and original voices too, because we have brand new writers that we've broken on this script, and we have a great filmmaker that I think is about Chris Dowling is going to pop into the big studio stuff soon, and we got a lot of
Nice.
great young actors, including Matt Cornett, whose series just got picked up for a second season. So
Wow.
get out there, go to badcounselors.com, figure out the theater close to you and go buy some tickets. And yeah, and feel free to listen if you and you guys want to listen to some fun banter between a husband and wife, go to Plate and Ponder as we talked about too. And then I'm going to ask you about how to get that tingy voice out of Zoom with my Roadcaster too.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode. It truly means a lot to me. I learned so much from this episode. I literally think about it even when we were done filming it. While I was editing it, I was like, wow, this is such good information for the next generation. So thank you guys so much. We appreciate it. We appreciate it if you could hit that like and subscribe. It does go super far, and we appreciate that. I also want to say a special thanks to Chris Fenton. Thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate it so much. And guys, go check out his Instagram, Feeding the Dragon. Hopefully you guys enjoy the episode. God bless.